and when we express them during our lives, they are recorded as part of the experiences of that life. After death, the higher qualities struggle to separate from the lower, self-centered part of our nature. This process is called the death struggle, and during it, the life's experiences are distilled into higher and lower parts. If man is seen as a milk bottle afloat between incarnations, it's like separating the spiritual cream from the milk of ordinary personal experience. The ego attracts the spiritual cream to itself. It can assimilate only that. None of the milk, the base and non-spiritual aspects can possibly enter it or become part of it. When the bottle is eventually no longer needed, when evaporation and distillation have occurred, it will disintegrate, and the purified essence will become part of the wholeness and oneness of the ocean, the world around it. So the discarded lower part, or shell, and the higher spiritual ego have finally separated at the end of a period known as gestation. Another review of the life just over takes place, and the second death occurs. After this second death, the separation of higher ego from lower shell, the lower discarded part, which contains the person's memories, remains in a subjective state known as kamaloka. Kamaloka means literally the place of desire. It is the realm of emotion, passion, carnality, and is divided into many regions and sub-regions corresponding to the passions and mental states of the dead. This is the summer land of the spiritualists and the judgment chamber of the ancient Egyptians. Uncle George is one of these shells, and these are the entities that come through at seances as communicating spirits. They still have their earthly desires and emotions, and it is these which hold them close to the earth. But they normally remain at this level for a comparatively short time and eventually crumble away. So while the shell in Kamaloka will disintegrate, the pearl lives on, and eventually, through rebirth, is integrated into a new life as a part of a necklace of incarnations we each live. And the process begins all over again. At first, it must enter the heavenly world of Devachan. Devachan means the place of the gods, and is the blissful state that the ego enjoys after it emerges from the death struggle and gestation. It is the equivalent of the ancient Egyptians' realm of Osiris, the Hindu Svarga, the Muslims' paradise, and the Christians' heaven. The common concept of heaven is as the dwelling place of God, gods, and spirits, and the home or state of being of the saved, the chosen, or the blessed. The term heaven also describes the celestial spheres, in contrast to the earth, the dwelling place of man, and the underworld, the place of the damned. Devachan is a subjective state, wholly conditioned by the spiritual content of the immediate past life on earth. The masters say that we create our own Devachan, mostly during the last days or even moments of our intellectual, sentient lives. In the same way that a baby, through infancy, gradually awakens to the novel surroundings of earth life, so consciousness, and with it a momentary remembrance of our past life, returns slowly as the ego enters the heaven state of Devachan. The karma of its past life, good and bad deeds, words and thoughts, become effective only on rebirth into a new physical body in the physical world where all these causes started. In this way, we always have to pay for our sins, voluntary and involuntary, on return to earth life. Meanwhile, we are rewarded in Devachan, for this is a state of intense selfness, during which an ego reaps the reward of its unselfishness on earth. No pain, no shadow of sorrow comes to darken the bright horizon of this happiness. Each of us creates our own Devachan around us like a dream. And for each of us, that perfect dream is reality, where we make for ourselves all we wish to see. We cannot look down and see or contact our loved ones on earth. We are not aware of anything they may be suffering as a result of our death. We create them and have them with us just as we hold them in our mind's eye. In the Devachan states, there are as many varieties of bliss as on earth there are shades of color and sound and levels of capability to perceive and appreciate them. As in physical earth life, there is for the ego in Devachan a life cycle, beginning with a birth and slow emergence into Devachan and ending in a slow decline. But not a death, but a birth into another physical body, a baby on earth. The quality of lives in Devachan and on earth is determined wholly by the law of cause and effect, karma. As the physical body disintegrates, and the astral double too, the constituents of our mortal souls disperse. None of these, however, disappears without trace. Each leaves behind it in the inner worlds a residue conditioned by how we lived our life. These are the physical, psychic, and mental tendencies and predispositions called skandhas in the East, the accumulated experience of our past life, which is carried forward to the next incarnation. The new personality will be conditioned by these results of the ego's previous lives. It is through these skandhas that we come into our new life with all the elements of our personal makeup, our characters, in short, already formed. And all this is according to the perfectly just law of karma. We really do become what we have made ourselves. The new being is now rewarded and punished on earth for the good and bad deeds of the old life. Karma is an entry book in which all our acts are carefully recorded to our debit and credit by ourselves, or rather by our thoughts and actions. It is as if at the end of each life a line is drawn and the balance of credit and debit carried over into the next. The old me is the true parent of the new me, far more so, in fact, than any mother or father in the flesh.
Life, death, death, life. The words have led for ages our thought and consciousness, and firmly seemed two opposites. But now long-hidden pages are opened, liberating truths undreamed. Life only is, or death is life disguised. Life, a short death, until by life we are surprised.
So the cycle is completed from death to rebirth, the sudden onset of unconsciousness at death, through Kamaloka, waking in Devachan with its blissful and vividly real dreams. Then the ego subsides back into unconsciousness. And just prior to our rebirth, we have a vision of the new life to come. We eventually wake again as an infant into whatever that new life has in store for us. We start with a ready-made character and some know-how gleaned in past lives, but also with some handicaps, karmic limitations. So death, like life, is a natural part of an ongoing continuous process, a long series of associated but separate earth lives, each responsible for the condition of the next. We have seen a full and detailed account of what happens when we die, and we know now that the reason for living, and therefore dying many times, is to work out karma, to gain experience for our long-term evolution and development, until we finally reach the stage of perfection and are freed from the need to reincarnate anymore. Just as at the end of each day, we're not quite the same as we were when we woke, so at the end of each life, through experience, we have changed. And in this, we are each an example of the evolutionary nature of nature herself. She too is on the road to perfection, stage by stage, life by life, learning through experience, growing to fulfillment.
There are two beings in my single self. A Godhead watches nature from behind, at play in front with a brilliant surface elf, a time-born creature with a human mind. Tranquil and boundless like a sea or sky, the Godhead knows himself, eternity's sun, radiant his mind and vast, his heart as free. His will is a scepter of dominion. The smaller self, by nature's passions driven, thoughtful and erring, learns his human task. All must be known, and to that greatness given, his mind and life, the mirror and the mask. As with the figure of a cymbal dance, the screened omniscient plays at ignorance.
To the higher ego, existence, life, is a cyclic process of birth and death, dying as one person, returning to earth life as another. We are breathed in and then out again. It is as natural as that. Behind all created things, there is an everlasting something, an absolute something that always is. This something is the very origin of existence. From it stems all life in every thing or being in the cosmos. It is the root source of all creation, of all thinking and feeling, all ideas and ideals. One aspect of it is universal memory. It is the master plan of design and form in nature, containing in itself the archetypes of all that is or ever will be.
The electron on which forms and worlds are built leaped into being, a particle of God, a spark from the eternal energy split. It is the infinite's blind, minute abode. In that small, flaming chariot Shiva rides, the one devised innumerably to be. His oneness in invisible forms he hides, time's tiny temples to eternity. Atom and molecule in their unseen plan buttress an edifice of strange onenesses. Crystal and plant, insect and beast and man. Man on whom the world unity shall seize, widening his soul spark to an epiphany of the timeless vastness of infinity.
The whole cosmos is a living completeness, and everything in it is and has life. There is no dead matter. Everything, even what is called inorganic substance, has to some degree the dual aspects of form, which is matter, and energy, which is life. The energy in the atoms of matter is conscious, sentient, at its own level. It is spirit. In this sense, everything is spiritual in its essential nature. It is from the inward spiritual realms that physical things with their natures and characteristics are projected into objectivity. This is the true process of what is called creation, but everything existed in the divine mind before it was brought into being.
And what if all of animated nature be but organic harps diversely framed, that tremble into thought, as o'er them sweeps plastic and vast one intellectual breeze, at once the soul of each and God of all.
For most of us, the most conclusive evidence for survival after death is the experience of those who have been regarded as clinically dead, but who have then recovered and have talked about what happened to them. Hundreds of such cases have been recorded and investigated during recent years.
The consultant, having looked at the x-rays, they could see that the vertebrae in the neck were in fact broken. I was waiting to go into the operating theatre. I suddenly realised that I was in fact not still lying on the bed, but I'd moved to being above the bed. I was on the ceiling, but looking down upon myself. I suddenly started to progress down a tunnel. Passed down through the dark part, it then became suddenly golden towards the end, and I suddenly emerged into this absolutely beautiful garden. On my right-hand side was my friend Eeuwen, and she stood there, and she had died about 10 weeks previously. I wasn't at all surprised to see her. She said, it's a super place here, and I said, yeah, I can see that, you know. But then I left her. Why I left her, I don't know. And as I proceeded along the path, again on the right-hand side, stood my father. Now, he'd died 2 years previously. He looked as he used to look before he'd be very ill, big and chubby and round and friendly. And it was wonderful to see him as I remembered him a few years previously. And he equally was very pleased to see me, I pleased to see him, but it didn't seem odd. It was just a meeting, and he said, you know, oh, it's lovely to have you here, Claire. And I said, you know, it's great to be here, Dad. But at this point I thought, oh dear, should I be here? I think that was the thing. I felt that perhaps I couldn't stay with my father at that point. And in fact I said quite apologetically to him, but Dad, I can't stay, I'm sorry. I can't stay with you now. I've got to get back. I've got to get back. The boys need me. I immediately left everything, and I was immediately back in the bed, looking back up at the ceiling, as I'd been before whatever happened, happened.
It is only in near-death experiences that we seem to reunite with our loved ones who have died before us. In actual death, this does not happen, as we are unconscious. The masters tell us a great deal about what happens to what are called premature deaths, those that commit suicide or are killed in accidents. These are the exceptions to